Welcome to this week's edition of the 4 Levels of Solution to 5G online course. This week's module is all about creating a safe and healthy home. And joining us today is one of the foremost experts on the planet in doing so. He's a leading building biologist, Oram Miller. Oram, thank you so much for joining us today and for going deeper and teaching us, bringing your extensive knowledge to everyone today.
You're welcome, Josh. Glad to be of service.
Now, just tell us a little bit about your background. What is the type of work that you do, and what are the type of clients whom you work with?
Well, I've been a building biologist going on 17 years now, and I did the full scope of building biology work when I was in the upper Midwest in Minnesota. That involves indoor air quality, lead, radon, asbestos, natural gas, carbon monoxide, and electromagnetic fields. When I moved to California, going on 10 years ago now, I decided to just focus exclusively on EMF. So I evaluate people in their homes and offices here in Southern California, and then long distance with people from throughout the United States and Canada and world, looking at electric fields, magnetic fields, radio frequencies, and dirty electricity. And of course, now that includes 5G.
Mm-hmm. And you're also the Director of Learning and Development for the Building Biology Institute, correct? Where you have designed and implemented and teach courses that even our audience today here can go deeper into, and whether it's someone just interested in learning more, or whether it's medical doctors or anyone else coming in, you're basically the man who's making a lot of that happen, right?
Well, I'm one of the faculty. I'm not the senior faculty. That would be Larry Gust, an electrical engineer and building biologist in Ventura, California, about an hour to the west of where I live in Los Angeles. And he was interviewed by you in your 5G summit. And Rob Metzinger, who is the proprietor of Safe Living Technologies in Ontario, Canada. They are and he's an electronic technologist and building biologist. So they are the two main teachers, and I'm an adjunct teacher with them at the entry-level and advanced EMF seminars that the Building Biology Institute holds. And then I'm also the Director of Learning, Development, as you mentioned. It's a title that they bestowed upon me just because of all the volunteer work that I do for the profession. So now I really work with people who are interested in joining the profession. I founded the apprenticeship program, so I work very closely with the students to help further their education once they leave our seminars, so that they can really do the best job possible to help people learn what EMFs are in their homes and find out what solutions are possible.
So Oram, this is a extended module. This is probably going to be the longest module of this course. And what we're doing for all of us out there is much of this presentation is going to establish a very important foundation about comprehending the technical aspects of 5G in context of mostly in context of the residential, you in your home. And so that from that, which is most of this presentation, then we are going to transition into Oram's expertise in specific solutions. So this is, your expanded scope in this presentation, Oram, is something that I consider to be a bonus and very important. And it is very much, going deeper, taking that amazing content that we have in the summit, and actually taking the time to really
to dive deep,
flesh out and dive deep, and really clarify our comprehension of the different aspects technologically, so that we can best empower ourselves and make the wisest solutions in terms of making our homes safe. So we're covering sort of, two major aspects of this conversation in this module. Would you add anything to the overall, what we're going to achieve today?
Well, very well said, Josh. And the reason why we need to have you, or want to invite you to understand this deep dive, as TC Doucette said in her presentation, why that's so important is because when I'm asked as a building biologist, when any of my colleagues are asked for protection strategies, shielding protection, well, we have to understand what are the frequencies involved, what is the modulation, how does it behave. So that's why I learned all that at a trade show, and from the readings that I've done with industry publications, and from the engineers that I've interviewed. you need to understand what you're dealing with before you can propose which strategy to employ, because the different shielding materials, as you'll see, have different performance characteristics at different frequencies. Is it constant? Is it intermittent? Is it pulsed? None of it's analog, but it's all pulsed. It's all modulated. So what are we dealing with? And then is it a wide coverage, always on, or is it narrow and on demand? How does it work? So you're going to learn all that, and then you'll understand how best to choose which strategy is best for you. And some of what you're going to learn will be things you may not want to hear, because it involves, in addition to what's coming outside your home, the things you have close to your personal space that you use. Even though you're maybe electrically sensitive, you're still using these things. I talk about that. We'll get into that, how that's impacting you as well. And Larry Gus went into that in great detail in his presentation, my mentor and fellow building biologist. So.
Yeah. So everyone, if you haven't watched Larry's presentation, please go back and watch that. Perhaps after you do this one, Larry's presentation from the summit, because that acts as a companion to this conversation. Absolutely. In addition, one last thing before we dive into Oram's presentation, I want to mention that make sure as you're watching this on the web page, below this talk, look for a link to download the PDF that Oram and I co-created. We collaborated on the PDF, and many of you have already downloaded it. The 7 essential ways to make your home safe from 5G and EMF radiation. Now that is the other, probably more direct companion to this talk. So be sure to open that, and there's specific links to the specific products and where you can buy them, and the websites that Oram and I both have researched extensively with Oram's colleagues at the Building Biology Institute, and the recommended things for you to implement quickly and effectively in your own life. So with that, Oram, let's dive into the presentation. You have one more thing you want to say first.
Yes, one more thing. Don't expect to absorb all of this in one pass through. Watch this presentation and other presentations that Josh has done over and over, more than once. Take notes, and if you don't get it at first, just let it go, keep going, just absorb it, and then come back. And then the second and third viewing, you're going to pick up a lot more. So. And
some people prefer also a learning method of bites at a time. So 20, 30 minutes at a time, and come back to it. That's why we're releasing this, in steps to help us, learn and be able to absorb as we go. This is a world-class education. Even on the summit, Oram, some of the feedback that I've got from experts is we're getting a university level education, and we're even going deeper today. So with that being said, Oram, let's dive into your presentation.
Thank you. So what I'll be covering is an overview of 5G as I understand it. I have attended a trade show from the industry with 22,000 other engineers, and I just asked questions. I went from exhibit booth to exhibit booth and asked the antenna manufacturers and the cell phone manufacturers, what is 5G? How does it differ from 4G? What are the frequencies that are used? What are the technologies? How is it modulated? I needed to understand this because people are asking me in my work, and more than half of my clients are electrically sensitive. And so they want to know what is the potential health risk? How can I measure it? How can I protect myself? What is the real risk here? And so in order to answer those questions, I needed to understand the technology. So I'm at the point where I can read industry publications. They have a lot of acronyms, and it's hard to remember them all, but I can get through most of it and understand what they're saying, because it's very complex now, much more complex than it ever has been. So we're going to go over 5G, how it works, how it's going to be deployed, or what they're planning on doing, and then how we can measure it and how we can protect ourselves. So that's an overview of what we're going to cover. So in summary, what is 5G? As I understand it, it covers all of the cellular technologies that are going to be implemented in the coming decade, starting about a year ago in 2018. It includes the Internet of Things, the IoT, which is something that's new, and It promises faster download speeds, lower latency y, meaning more real time for virtual reality and autonomous cars if we ever get that far. But just everything will be faster. But the health effects are not being acknowledged, and many speakers that you interviewed, Josh, and were presented in the 5G Summit that you all are watching, have watched and will continue to watch, have gone into that in great detail. And one thing that's important from the beginning here is people say, Oram, I've got 5G on my router, and I've had it for a while. Is that a problem? What they're seeing is 5.8 gigahertz, which is one of the two unlicensed frequencies that the FCC has given to manufacturers of cordless telephones and Wi-Fi, the other one being 2.4 gigahertz. So you'll see 2.4G and 5G on your router. That's not the same thing as the 5th generation cell technology that we're talking about. 5G primarily involves data communication between your mobile devices and eventually fixed devices, which I'll go into, and these cell towers. So it's data, not voice and text. So over the decades, here's a brief history. We have the first generation of cell technology 40 years ago in the 1980s, where we had the capability of wireless cell telephone voice calls. Then in the 1990s, text was added, that's 2G. Third generation came along in 2001 and added the ability to get on the internet wirelessly. And then 4G, which is the decade that we're just finishing up until 2018 or so, allows faster video, faster internet, and streaming audio and streaming video. 5G will include all of this, text, calling, it's in there, but primarily what 5G is about is faster data transmission, ultra high definition, 3D video, and so on, and smart homes and smart cities. So this is, what you see on this slide here is very important to understand. There is a misunderstanding in the EMF community, I will say, just because of what we're focusing on, that 5G involves frequencies that are above 20 gigahertz. So 24, 23, 24, 26, 28, 39, 40 gigahertz and above, 60 gigahertz. These are frequencies that we've not used for cell technology before, and that's what we're learning about. And it will be part of the picture that's coming, or that they're planning. But 5G will also include the frequencies that are already in existence now at the lower end of the spectrum. I mean, it's all in the high band, but the high frequency band, we're talking millions and billions of cycles per second. But the low to mid band, as far as the industry is concerned, is from 600 megahertz to 6 gigahertz. So that's this red and orange portion here. This is called 5G sub 6 gigahertz because it's from 6 gigahertz down. There will not be cell frequencies for a while in this band or gap between 6 and 24. And then from 24 gigahertz up is the upper or high band, the millimeter wave band, and we'll explain why it's called millimeter in a few minutes. So in general, I want everyone to understand what radio frequency wireless transmissions are and how they affect our health. We use wireless transmitters in our mobile devices, our cell phones, tablets, laptops, which many people already have and have had for many years. And they emit radio frequencies either intermittently or constantly. And we have to determine that with our meters when we do our EMF evaluations. And that will go right into your body at close range, but even from a distance, across the room or in the next room, or even outside, coming in through your windows and walls. Now, here's the most important thing, and this is why a lot of people don't take this seriously, because in the days of cigarettes, you could smell it and see it. And I remember that when I was a child in the 50s and 60s. Not so with radio frequencies. They're odorless, but mostly they're silent and invisible. You need a meter to see them and hear them, and we have that capability with our meters, or your body will feel it. And that's how a lot of people know that they have RF in their environment, and they realize that it's not healthy for them, besides what they read, because they feel the effects. So radio frequencies are harmful on a cumulative basis on a cellular level. Unfortunately, in this country and in many countries around the world, government regulatory agencies, which are supposed to safeguard our health, are, in the words of many activists, captured by the cell industry, as was the case with tobacco, asbestos, and lead and gasoline. So as far as we know, you're on your own as far as protection is concerned. So in the building biology profession and the EMF community in general, we say three things, and we'll cover this later. in detail: reduce use, increase distance, and favor hardwire connections. So 4G LTE macro cell towers are what we have now for 3G and 4G, and that's what you see here, these long, thin antennas, and that's just a plastic cover. But behind this is an antenna that goes out 120 degrees, so we need many of them around the circle here. And so they're about a mile to a mile and a half apart. This is the existing 4G macro cell tower architecture that will stay in place and will continue to be used. And there are about 800,000 of these, or excuse me, 300,000 of them. I think that number is for the United States. Now, there'll be a massive deployment, at least that's what they're planning, of millions of new 4G and 5G antennas in urban and suburban areas on residential streets and in buildings in urban areas. So these small cell arrays will be in front of every 2 to 10 homes on every street in residential neighborhoods, but you'll have both 5G and 4G LTE antennas together in the same location. This is all part of 5G. 5G includes 4G antennas coming closer to your home. We'll cover that again on other slides. So the 4G antenna that's behind these covers here is in this round cover here, or in this diagram. And then the 5G antenna would be the square box underneath it. And then the radio is maybe this box or this box. The radio is what does the processing, and then the antennas are above it. So square antennas for 5G, and the 4G could be up in these round antennas. So how 5G will work is that existing 4G macro cell towers, they can locate your cell phone down to about 50 feet, but that's not good enough for the cell industry in terms of what their future plans are and what they're doing now. Because what they've wanted for some time and haven't been able to do until recently, with the deregulation and saying that we're in a war with, or not a war, but a race with other countries like China, that has allowed them to put, or to propose putting, these small cell antennas on every block in front of people's homes. And what that does, by getting them closer to customers, that allows them to then locate the phone with the 4G signal down to 3 feet. And at that point, then the 5G antenna with its faster upload and download speed can extract data at high speeds. That will be a new revenue stream for the cell companies, because they'll then be able to monetize that data and sell it to advertisers. The problem that we see is, besides the 5G that everyone's concerned about, we also need to be aware that 4G LTE signals will bathe homes with a wide, always-on RF signal. So the 5G, people need to understand, will be on demand. That's how the technology works. It only transmits when a device, whether fixed or mobile, initiates a connection, and the beam is much narrower. So the 4G signal on the small cell antennas, it could be 10 watts. I've heard up to 100 or 200 watts of effective radiated power, but that's compared to 800 to 1,000 watts maximum of effective radiated power from existing macro cell 4G antennas. So this always-on 4G LTE antenna will be 30 to 100 feet in front of these homes. So there'll be both on and you see them on these utility poles within 30 to 100 feet of the bedrooms and the homes here on this block. Not a mile to a mile and a half away. It'll be supplemental to the existing macro network that we already have.
Question: do you agree with Professor Trevor Marshall and his assessment that that means approximately and at least 100 times more radiation exposure
Yes.
from this, even though the power emission is less, right?
Yes.
They're closer. They're in our front yards. Is that a reasonable estimation, or do you have a different perspective on that?
Josh, I should have put that in here. Yes, Trevor's here in Southern California, about a half hour away from me, and I've communicated with him extensively in the writing of the course for the Building Biology Institute. So yes, and I saw his presentation when he was interviewed by you. I totally agree with everything he said. Yes, so the answer is yes, that's the problem. Even though these 4G antennas, they'll be supplemental to what's already out there. So when they drop in, maybe not directly in front of your home, maybe down a little bit, but that's always going to be there, that 4G signal. And yes, it's going to be quite high. We've measured upwards of 400,000, almost 500,000 microwatts per meter squared. in homes. I've measured several 100,000 microwatts per meter squared in homes that have 4G antennas in front of them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So the 5G signals above 20 gigahertz cannot pass through regular building materials unless they're beamformed. So because of the short wavelength, which we'll get into. So these beamformed signals, I was told by engineers, 2 degrees wide, 15 degrees wide. So that's why I put in that range. I got different numbers from different engineers. And those signals will not sweep the residential neighborhoods constantly like 4G signals will, but they will be widespread particularly in cities and in some suburbs. Urban areas are going to be saturated with the 5G signals, unfortunately. So 4G LTE signals will be.
Can I just say not? Can I just say like not if we continue to do something about it? Like that's their plan. That's their plan. Anyways, like I just sorry for
yeah. And I changed the wording in some of these slides from will to would. Yeah, if they had their way, and there's some questions about that even from their standpoint, which you'll see in further slides.
And we're learning and educating local governments how they do have much more power than they realize. So yeah, please continue. Forgive my interruption.
No, ask anytime. Thank you. 4G, as I said, will be much closer and constantly bathing homes with radio frequencies. That's the big part of this that needs attention. And those activists who are in the know, they know this. Along with the 5G antenna. And that's part of it. It's all 5G to have both of these side by side, but they have different characteristics in terms of how they work. And as I wrote here, activists say the 4G LTE signals close to homes will be as problematic as beamformed 5G signals in the high band above 20 gigahertz. Now, 4G equipment in the sub-6 gigahertz frequencies will be updated on the macro towers and in the 4G equipment that goes into residential neighborhoods where they will be putting it in. Such technologies as carrier aggregation, advanced massive multiple in, multiple output, and then quadrature amplitude modulation. So carrier aggregation allows more data to travel over multiple paths simultaneously in front of the antenna than exists now with 4G. Multiple in, multiple out, you'll see in a few slides, refers to how many antennas there are. There are only 2x2 or 4x4 for existing 4G antennas. With 5G, they're talking about 64, 8x8, or even more than that, because the wavelengths are smaller. They can get more antennas into that rectangular box, and then they can beamform with it, which we'll show you in a few slides. And then the 256 is a higher rate of quadrature amplitude modulation, which is a technique that crams higher data throughput into the same space or airspace on the same cellular frequencies. And then here's beamforming, which is possible even not just in the high band above 20 gigahertz, but it is possible in the mid band down to about 2 gigahertz. So in the existing frequencies that 4G antennas use, beamforming will be possible, which focuses the energy to the user's device. And then there's going to be a lot of artificial intelligence, or AI. The whole thing is becoming more automated, and edge computing will involve the equipment on the perimeter of the network to think for itself and to make decisions for itself without having to check into the central core. So it speeds things up. So 5G is very complex, using technologies that have been under development for decades. So these technologies are not new, they just haven't been implemented until now. And these technologies that have been under development for decades are allowing the industry to move into the millimeter waves above 20 gigahertz. And in the words of the engineers, they say the network will balance itself on the fly. Now, the words that they're using are network densification, antenna densification. That's what's planned primarily for urban areas. The urban areas, interestingly, have less than half the customers, but they have more than half of the data traffic that is on the network. So all 4 carriers, the major carriers, have launched mobile 5G service in select cities, and some are also doing fixed wireless, and they'll all be getting into that as well. Verizon started with fixed wireless, with fixed internet. You'll see that. So higher coverage allows more capability in dense urban areas where more customers live, work, and visit. Now, T-Mobile and the other carriers are providing maps showing where their coverage is in the cities where they're rolling this out. And that, so you see the website right here for T-Mobile's coverage. Just go to tmobile.com/coverage, and then you can find the map. So here's the one for Los Angeles, where I live. So all these, so 5G is the red areas, and then the rest of it is purple, meaning every place is covered with 4G. This is where the 5G is right now. This is already operational.
And this is, just for our audience, this is as of September 2019 when this is being recorded.
Right. Yeah, early September 2019. New York and LA are about as fully deployed. Maybe New York's, Manhattan, and some parts of Brooklyn a little bit more dense than this. The other cities, Dallas, Las Vegas, and Cleveland and Atlanta are not as filled in as this. And so this just shows you that it's in right now, it's in spotty locations, not everywhere for the 5G service. But it's coming, or at least they're trying. So the download speeds have been measured at 1 to 2 gigabits per second, which is 1,000 to 2,000 megabits per second in terms of the download speed for data with these companies, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. And that's about 10 times faster than 4G, but the coverage is spotty, as I showed you. Now, the speeds for the mid to low band coverage, the enhanced 4G that they're working on, in other words, when 5G gets applied in the low to mid band frequencies, then the speeds will be in the low to mid hundreds of megabits per second, which is still faster than than 4G, but it's not going to be the gigabit, 1 to 2 gigabit speed. But the coverage will be broader. So that's how the industry is approaching this. They're weighing coverage versus speed, because the physics of the waves determine how that works. So the longer wavelength signals in the low to mid bands below 6 gigahertz that we're using now for 3G and 4G allow signals to travel farther and pass right through walls better. And those of any of you with radio frequency meters, you understand this, and those of us who use cell phones understand that we can still get our signals through walls. But the higher millimeter band 5G delivers larger amounts of data because it can be a faster download, but it's over a shorter distance. So the cell carriers are going to use a multi-band strategy for 5G using both sub 6 gigahertz and above 20 gigahertz bands. And dynamic spectrum sharing is a technology that's new that allows them to share 4G and 5G technologies in the low to mid band. And many of the features that I mentioned, the carrier aggregation, the massive MIMO, the 256 QAM, all of that's going to take years to be deployed if everything goes the way they want it to go. And antenna densification means millions of additional small cell antennas placed in urban and suburban residential areas, including public places like parks, stadiums, and college campuses. So let's take a look at what some of this will look like. Small cell antennas with 4G and 5G antennas and technology will take many shapes. So we have the mono single pole, the air pole, and this round thing at the top, this is the 4G antenna here. The 5G is the box, and that could be it there, although that could also be the radio for this transmitter here. This is called strand mount, which is on wires, power lines. And then we have something called the magic box. This little box here will be placed in apartments, throughout the apartments on different floors, and transmit 5G signals. They'll put these on rooftops, under manhole covers, and on bus stops. And this is another idea that's sprouted in Silicon Valley, south of San Francisco. This is rooftop-mounted Wi-Fi transmitters that are networking with each other. Facebook and a company called Common Networks is offering this using open, unlicensed frequencies that I mentioned before, the 5.8 gigahertz frequency, which is a Wi-Fi frequency and cordless telephone frequency, and 60 gigahertz. I didn't know that, but that's an unlicensed frequency. That's up in the millimeter wave band. And so these are networked together, and you can get a 20, 80, or 300 megabits per second plan from these companies. And the signals are relayed from rooftop to rooftop and at street level millimeter wave antennas. So that's what it looks like there. Now, I mentioned just about a year ago, Order 18133 in September of 2018. That order was passed by the Federal Communications Commission, and 4G and 5G small cell antennas will be deployed. That deployment has been fast-tracked in the last 12 months in neighborhoods, overriding local control. So it's interesting that the local governments are not in favor of this, and they're aligning with activists on the EMF community, but they're doing it for the money. We're doing it for the health. So it's an interesting alliance. So cell carriers want to compete with regulated cell companies and telephone companies to deliver fixed internet service to homes, and that's over what's called fixed wireless. We'll show that later. And we will have a massive data extraction from devices at high speeds over the 5G millimeter signals. Now, cellular data will be carried, interestingly enough, by the cell industry over miles of new fiber optic fiberglass data cables that they're laying down, and that's called the backhaul network. People think that when you talk on your cell phone and it goes to the cell tower near you within a mile of your house, that it then hops from cell tower to your sister in Seattle. But it turns out that no, that's not how it works. There's a backhaul between LA and Seattle for the calls that is over satellite. It's over microwave antennas from mountaintop to mountaintop or building to building. But they're also going to be using the fiber optic, and you can run terabytes of data over the backhaul fiber for pennies. So think about that as we talk about solutions. And then what the cell companies will do is take that data where the fiber optic cable brings the data to the small cell antenna on your block, and then sprays the data wirelessly to your house for the last mile with an always-on signal bathing your house in very strong radio frequencies, as strong as you would measure next to your router if you're close to your router, and that's what's coming in through your window from the 4G antenna, not the 5G antenna, the 4G antenna, but it's part of 5G. And that bathes the homes with radio frequencies at close range. 4G signals will be always on, difficult to fully shield against, although we can do that. And the stronger power density at the homes will be there from distant 4G, stronger than the distant 4G cell towers that have a higher effective radiated power, as we just discussed, Josh, a few minutes ago.
Just a quick point there. Solving that last mile problem is going to be the main topic of focus in Timothy Sheckley's module in this course. I just wanted to let everyone know that. But thank you for laying all that out, Oram, and lining that up.
Yeah, and yes, I saw both Trevor's presentation and Tim's. Stellar, just excellent. These two men are gems. They're engineers. They know what they're talking about, and the whole world's governments, local and federal, should pay attention to them, and the industry should pay attention to them and find common ground, find ways to work together to solve this problem. Instead of being adversaries, we have to find ways to work together. So the physics of the 5G band, or in the millimeter band, in the high band, are as follows. So the high millimeter band above 20 gigahertz is already being used and has been used for decades by radar, by the military, by aviation, and then also by satellite, for satellite TV. So you cannot put this antenna inside your attic and expect to get good service, because the roof, just a typical plywood roof with asphalt shingles, blocks that millimeter wave signal. So the military, airport radar, etc., use this bandwidth. The wavelength is very short, 3 to 5 millimeters long, which is less than half an inch. It's very short, as opposed to the wavelengths that we have in 4G, which is 5 inches to about a foot. So the band between 6 and 20 gigahertz, if you want to know what's in there, it will have Wi-Fi 6 when that comes around, and sub 18 gigahertz 5G. I don't know what that is yet. And then something called sub 10.6 gigahertz UWB. I looked these up, couldn't find out any more information about them. So we may be hearing about them at trade shows and from industry websites. I follow those. So, but that's what will be in that gap between 6 and 20 gigahertz. But for now, there's no cell signals or frequencies allotted to any companies by the FCC in that particular band. It's below 6 gigahertz or above 20 gigahertz. And they're not currently used for cell activity. So the signals in the high millimeter band above 20 gigahertz are easily blocked and slowed and scattered by rain, by air molecules, by moisture that's in the air. Also by standard building materials. As I mentioned, the roof situation here, satellite antenna has to be on the outside of the roof with no leaves in the way to the satellite to the south. Wood, brick, stucco, they all block 5G signals unless they're beamformed, even with no special shielding like with Y-shield paint or building foil. So the millimeter wave signals travel a shorter distance than the lower bands, only about a block to a block and a half. That's what the industry says. However, Verizon has tested their 28 gigahertz 5G signal for their fixed internet service, and they picked it up at least half a mile away, if not farther, with a good gigabit per second download speed at a half a mile. So for that reason, the activists are saying to put these 5G signals with the existing 4G macro cell antennas a mile and a half apart. But we'll get into that. So the advantages of the millimeter band for the industry is faster speed, greater bandwidth, and lower latency, which means more real time in terms of the performance of the transmission for like virtual reality and that sort of thing. Whereas the cell carriers favor the low to mid band, and they always have. They'd rather keep all the traffic down there because below 6 gigahertz, because the traffic can go through walls. Walls do not block signals in this band, the low to mid band below 6 gigahertz, but the ones that the band or the frequencies we've been using all these decades. Also not blocked by rain, water molecules, or air. Can travel for miles, but the cellular transmission speeds are not as fast. So that's the trade-off. So you see here, this 4G signal, which can be anywhere between 700 to 2500 megahertz, so even up to 6000 megahertz or 6 gigahertz now. But the wavelength is 5 inches to 13 inches, and it can go through the building walls. It'll be weakened, and the signal will be much lower here, even if this is just a house and you're over here. But when you get up to the second story, that's when I start seeing higher radio frequency signal strengths in people's homes, maybe 50 to 100 microwatts per meter squared in typical second story bedrooms here in Los Angeles. I'm sure it's true all over the world. When you get away from the shadow of the neighboring houses, you get downstairs, then you can get 3 to 5 microwatts per meter squared. That's a nice number, below 10. That's the goal for our profession. But these 5G signals here that are 30 gigahertz, 30,000 megahertz is 30 gigahertz. They're only an inch, half an inch, and they will not go through this building. Now, here's more about the physics of 5G. Moisture and air which is right here, you see, so this is attenuation. The higher you go up here, the more these signals are blocked. And this is 10 gigahertz, and you're going up the frequency, and here's 100 gigahertz here. So what they're talking about is using frequencies here, and 24, 28, 39, up in here. But water molecules will block the signal, and oxygen itself, air molecules will block the signal at 60 gigahertz. And at sea level, it's a thicker air, so there's more attenuation than when you're 5 miles up. That's what this graph means. So here are the summary of the new technologies that 5G will utilize across the spectrum. Beamforming down to 2 gigahertz, massive MIMO, multiple input, multiple output, full duplex, I'll explain that. Virtualization of the network, and dual mode capability and artificial intelligence, I'll explain dual mode. And these small cell wireless transmission facilities, that's the name they're using, with both 4G and 5G antennas will be closer to homes. So massive input, or massive MIMO, excuse me, will increase the multiple input, multiple output factor by a factor of 22. So from 4G antennas to the 5G will go up by 22. And these current 4G antennas are 2T2R. That means 2 transmit, 2 receive, or 4T4R. The new 5G antennas in the mid to high band frequencies above 2 gigahertz will be 64T, 64R, 8 by 8. And you'll see a picture of that. Here's another slide showing various rectangular 5G antennas. And here we have 8 by 8. I have another slide that shows that, but this is, and they're smaller, you see, because the wavelengths are smaller. Now this is beamforming. This is how it works. So imagine that we're looking down at the top of one of those 8 by 8 arrays, and this is the top row here. And you see that these things do not move. But electronically, if they're all coordinated through the artificial intelligence on the networking through computers, if this antenna here puts out a signal that's bigger than the antenna at the other end, then the direction of if all of them send out a signal simultaneously, instead of all of them being the same strength, which would put a signal that would go straight out this way, because it's bigger here and smaller there, it bends the signal, the total signal, to go in the direction of this blue arrow to the left if you're looking down from the top. You see what I'm saying? It's so that would be to a cell phone user over in that direction from this antenna. That's how beamforming is done. But you can do this. It's all fast. It's all in real time. They can do this to multiple users at once. So this is just an example down here of this narrow beam, 2 to 15 degrees wide, going to this single cell phone that initiates the connection to this 5G array here. That's how that will work. And I was told by multiple engineers that if there's nobody here asking for the signal, then these 5G antennas will sit dormant. They will not be sweeping the neighborhood with signals. The 4G antenna will, but not the 5G antenna, unless there's someone who initiates. So do the math. You got to think about it. If you're going to be with a lot of other people, like in dense urban areas, then you're going to have a lot of signals. I'll get into that. So we have different angles here. Total signals focused onto one or more mobile devices at once. Narrow beam. Beamforming can be done down to 2 gigahertz. It's on demand, initiated by the device, whereas 4G LTE signals are up to 120 degrees wide, which I didn't show you, not in these two diagrams, and they're always on. And this is a photograph that I took at a trade show showing 8x8 antennas in a rectangular 5G transmitter, 64T, 64R, transmit, receive. And then the next two photos are very interesting. There was a pad, a tablet that was there for this antenna manufacturer, and what you're supposed to do is pick that up and aim it at the antenna right there and here that was behind it. This is a 4G antenna, this is a 5G antenna, and so and you can see it here in the screen, but because this thing is focusing on that diagram there, it initiated this what do you call this this video that was superimposed, showing this yellow, green, purple, and red. These are all beams going out to 4 different customers at once. And then this, the guy told me, he said, well, if there's only one person in front of this 5G antenna, he's going to get all 4 of them, or however many come out of there. And you know, he said, well, that's better because they'll have faster download speeds, but it also means that there's more of this signal focused on this one person. So you initiate this with your equipment. If you have a 4G, 5G hybrid phone, which you'll see in a moment, this is what's going to happen to you. So this is the image that people should have about what 4G is really going to look like. If you have multiple, 4 people initiating a connection, this is what it will look like. But you see how narrow, the industry did this, and this is accurate in terms of the width of this signal, you see. So if you live in a house that's to the right, you're not going to get the signal coming to you because it's narrowly going to the guy who's, off in front of this thing, and you're off to the side, or another house. I'll get into that. This is fixed wireless. This is part of what the companies are planning to do. Verizon started with this internet service in Los Angeles. There's a test city, Sacramento, Houston, and Indianapolis, and they're going to be expanding it. This is called the Consumer Equipment Unit, CEU. This goes preferably on a table near a window that's in the direction of the 28 gigahertz 5G antenna that will be out at, on your block or close within a block or so. And if the signal's not strong enough, they'll put this on the outside of the house, and then they're going to drill a hole and run an Ethernet cable to their router, which is here. And then this thing will transmit this signal through typical means that any router uses, which is 2.4, 5.8 gigahertz, those two wireless frequencies, or with an Ethernet cable. And I presume, like with any other router, we'll be able to go into the control panel through the computer, through an Ethernet cable, and through your browser, and disable the Wi-Fi in here. You can do that. And also Netgear and other companies have Wi-Fi routers that have a Wi-Fi on-off switch. You just press the button and the Wi-Fi turns off, but you can still get internet through the Ethernet cables. Now, full duplex allows voice and text to travel between mobile devices on the same frequency, because up till now, they've had to share the same. There's a delay in this. It takes longer, and also they've had to use 2 signals but 2 frequencies, but with full duplex, which is now mature as a technology. They're able to get even voice and data faster on the same frequency. So that's another upgrade with 5G. Dual mode capacity is interesting because right now your cell phone has the capacity to go to whatever means gives the fastest, most stable data connection. Remember that. So your phone always defaults to the fastest, most stable data connection. If you're a guy who has Wi-Fi in your house and you've got Wi-Fi enabled on your phone, the cell companies have set it up this way. They want the traffic to stay in the home and off of their cell tower down the street, their 4G tower. They want to keep it in the home. So your phone will go for data connections to the Wi-Fi network in your house. And if you visit someone and you don't have their password and you want to look up, something on your phone, you're going to go to the nearest 4G tower. That's how it's been for a long time now. When you're out of the house, you're always going to be on cellular data. But when you're home, you're on Wi-Fi. And there's also Bluetooth. So you have all these antennas in the phone, 5 of them. 1 or 2 for the cellular, for voice and data. Then you'll have cellular data. Voice and text. That's 1 antenna at a different frequency. Then you have cellular data. Then you have Wi-Fi. Then you have Bluetooth and 1 more, or maybe 2 of one of those. So you can turn all of those off and just have the calling, the voice and the text, and that's the safest way to use a cell phone. So anyway, these new 5G phones will be 4G, 5G hybrid phones. They'll do both, and they'll still have the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth and the cellular data through 4G, 5G. So 5G phones will default to whatever is the closest, most stable, fastest connection. So if you're in a home, if you're somebody who doesn't care about this, and you get a 5G phone, you're still going to be downloading and connecting to your Wi-Fi. But if there's a 5G antenna out front, or if you're in a city and you're mobile, then between 4G and 5G, if there's a 5G connection, you'll go to that first if it's closer and stronger than the 4G connection.
Question, just want to verify. So for those of us that still have cell phones, right, obviously one of the leading solutions talked about by Olga Sheehan and others in the summit is just we don't need cell phones to actually stop using cell technology. But for those of us that still use cell phones, what you're saying to turn the cellular data off in settings? That's a really good thing to do for as much as you can, right, to minimize your exposure?
Yeah, and I'm going to get into that later on, and I don't even know if I put that particular thing in the slide, but because since you brought it up, it's very important. What people need to understand is that the cell, and I do say later on in the slide that there are too many electrically sensitive people that I work with on a daily basis, and God bless them, and they're doing their best to try and help themselves. But half of those individuals, and those are half of my clients, by the way, who are symptomatic. 2/3 of them are sensitive, and in that group, there's a large group of people who are actually symptomatic. That's half of my clientele, and yet they still carry cell phones with them in their pockets, radiating out these beacon signals, and from notifications, updates, downloads. There's so much activity going on, and now with the most recent model of the iPhone, the 10. When I'm sitting there going over what EMS are, where they come from, how they affect your health, and what we do about them at a job, at a person's house, and they've got their cell phone on the table, and I'm going through all this, and I turn on my radio frequency detector, and I'm hearing this constant signal. I mean, I know that there's a router over there. I can hear the helicopter sound. I hear a buzzing from the cordless phone base unit not far away in the kitchen, and we're in the dining room. But there's this sound that I've learned to recognize, and I move my detector, my Gigahertz Solutions HF59B that we use in the building biology profession, closer to their cell phone, and it's getting louder. And I say, can you turn off the Bluetooth on their iPhone? And they do, and it goes away. It's constantly transmitting. It used to be intermittent with the earlier models, and now with the 10, what I've observed is that it's constantly transmitting. I don't know how the battery lasts all day, but it's constantly transmitting in your pocket or beside you, with 500,000 microwatts per meter squared if you're right on top of it, 100,000, 500,000, and as you move, but it's constant, and as you move away, it diminishes exponentially. But so there's some safety and distance, but it's not safe until you get to the next room for most people. And aside from that, many cell phones are intermittently putting out signals, even with chips and pendants on them. That's just not how they work. They don't eliminate the signal. They create a zone of coherence that neutralizes the way that these signals affect the body. But we still recommend reduce use, increase distance in favor of hardwired connections. So anyway, the best thing to do if you are not extremely electrically sensitive, in which case you cannot, I have clients like that who cannot carry a cell phone at all. They can't be around it. They can't have anybody else around them who has one, even on standby. But for those people who are moderately sensitive or mildly sensitive or just want to be health conscious, which constitutes the rest of the people I work with, what they can and should do is turn off, disable on settings on both Androids and iPhones, cellular data, well, first of all, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and cellular data, and even location, and then, but don't put it in airplane mode. And then you'll have the least signals, because if you leave those things on, your phone as it's configured right now from the store in your pocket, every time the tower, the 4G tower, tells you that it's got a download, a notification, an update, then the phone, or even a text comes in or an email, if you run your email through your phone, then every time there's a notification, the cell phone responds by saying, I'm ready. So it sends out a reply and establishes an electronic handshake. Every time there's a transmission from the phone, that's when you have danger and damage on a cellular level, as Martin Paul and the others have discussed, and Dr. Cruz and everybody so eloquently. Very important to listen to those folks. Anyway, so that's going on in your pocket, and because it's invisible and silent, you don't know it. You don't know that it's happening unless you get one of these meters that has sound, and many of them do. So, so that's happening quite often. So you need to turn those things off and get used to doing those tasks on a computer. It could be a fixed desktop or a laptop, but you're tethered. And then you you put it in airplane mode and turn off the Bluetooth. So we'll get to that.
So we'll get into that. I mean, we have this is like a jam-packed two-part essentially presentation, right? So in the second part, we'll get into those specific home solutions, including wired and Ethernet solutions, including for your phone. And obviously, just to clarify, you're saying you put it in airplane mode as much as possible, right?
Yes.
Like at night. But even when it's on, and in airplane, your cell is on, as much as possible, put it in Wi-Fi off, Bluetooth off, and cellular data off as much as possible. And
location.
And location off.
For them. Now, but bear in mind that if you, but don't put it in airplane mode if you want to receive texts or and get a call, like if you know. But that's why people should have telephones in their homes. Yeah, exactly. In their homes, they don't need their phone for anything. I learned recently that, because I have Android, I have an Android phone, but I have a Mac computer. But my point is, clients who have iPhones. So one gentleman told me that he has this arrangement that you have to set up, and I don't know, I forget the terminology for it, in his iPhone, so that he gets his iMessage program on his MacBook laptop, which we've hardwired with an Ethernet cable, and then we turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth, or an iMac. MacBook is the laptop, and then the iMac is the desktop. In either case, you can have iMessage, on a Macintosh computer, and you can actually mirror it in such a way through iCloud, which I don't use, but you could, through iCloud, what he was able to do was have all incoming messages show up on his computer, his MacBook or his iMac, including the Android green texts, because the blue iMessage text from other iPhone users show up as blue, and that goes through Wi-Fi, by the way, not through the cell tower. The green text, if you're an iPhone user, the green text come in from the cell user. From the cell connection. So it gets complicated.
Okay, so but for now, Oram, we have a ton of material to still get through. Let's dive back into this portion, completing it, and then we'll get into the solutions.
Agreed. Okay. All right, so continuing on here, on this slide, it says that So under dual mode capability, and this is important for people to learn and to understand, these new 4G, 5G hybrid phones will connect to Wi-Fi first for data if you're in the home, but there will be some 5G connection as well. But if there is no Wi-Fi, it will definitely be to the 4G tower down the street. If that's close, if there is no 5G antenna, you'll go to the 4G antenna that's within a mile as it exists now. But if they drop in a 4G, 5G small cell antenna in front of your house or somewhere on the block, then you'll go to that 4G. And if the 5G is strong, if you have a 5G phone, you will initiate a connection and get faster data that way. That's when you will get the 5G signal. And one thing that's important to know is that 5G works best. This is from Professor Marshall, Trevor Marshall. It works best if the device is stationary. The minute you pick it up and move it, he said, you lose the connection in many cases. And when people wrote about this, journalists for Wired magazine were given 4G, 5G hybrid phones in the test cities for these companies, Minneapolis and Chicago. And what they were reporting was when they were near a 5G antenna, they got a very fast 5G signal, and they were able to download Stranger Things, season 3, which was their testing in New York and Chicago and Minneapolis for the journalists. And they wrote how quickly they were able to download it with 4G versus 5G. But the minute the guy walked into a bakery, he lost the 5G connection, and then he was on to 4G, and it was the quote slower download speed. So so when the 5G phone is moved about, the data connection likely is switched back to the nearest 4G LTE antenna, per Dr. Marshall. So here's something that shows this. So here, many phones will be, quote, 5G compatible. You're already seeing that. Like AT&T's 5G E means extended, or 5G plus phones. And here you see the 5G E right here. That's really enhanced 4G LTE. So Verizon is coming out with some brands this summer, right now. Motorola Moto Z3, Samsung Galaxy 10, LG V50 ThinQ. AT&T is releasing Samsung Galaxy 10, S10. T-Mobile has, all four of them have 5G phones now, but they'll all be 4G, 5G hybrids. And even Apple is going to come out with a 5G phone next year.
Question, really quickly, does a 5G phone mean that your phone is transmitting millimeter wave band frequencies?
Let me show you. When it's connected to, when there's a 5G antenna to be connected to within its, in other words, see the phone is good, monitors what signals are available where it is. So if you're in a house, and most everyone, unless you're out in the country, has a 4G connection. Although I go to people's homes and they say we have terrible cell service for my company, and they have so they have a booster in their house. And other people will say, well, there's a cell tower right out, down the street there, but I have terrible service. Well, that could be T-Mobile, and they could have Verizon, and the Verizon tower could be 1.5 miles away, or further than that, 2 miles away. So that's that. So there's 4 networks with 4 overlapping networks of 4 carriers with 4 networks of frequency or coverage at different frequencies, so they don't interfere with each other. So this slide shows what it looks like inside one of these new 4G, 5G hybrid phones. So if you look in the upper right corner here, you have 2 antennas. This is an antenna array, and this is another one. This is labeled sub-6 gigahertz antenna because they're larger. There are only 4 of them, and they're larger in size because they're going to, they're connecting to a cell tower, the 4G tower, that has transmissions in the frequencies that are below 6 gigahertz. Whereas this one over here is the millimeter wave antenna array, which is, and you see there's, 16 of them, because the wavelengths are shorter, so they can have smaller antennas. And so this is the 5G antenna block, and this is the 4G antenna block. Now, this is an interesting perspective. This is realities on 5G deployment, according to industry executives that I've been reading. Some cell phone executives say that 5G will never scale beyond small pockets of hotspots in dense urban areas. I'm paraphrasing, what one gentleman said. Some say 5G will never reach rural areas in terms of the beamform signal. 5G is not considered by industry to be a coverage spectrum like 4G is. The majority of 5G traffic will be in dense urban areas. And I'm saying all this particularly for people who want to protect themselves, particularly if you're electrically sensitive. This is important information for you to know. But 5G will also include the deployment of 4G antennas, 4G LTE antennas on a massive number of new small cell arrays, dropping into neighborhoods and buildings in urban areas. Now, T-Mobile and Verizon, for instance, have licenses in the 28 and 39 gigahertz ranges for high-speed millimeter band service. You know, this is the high band that we're learning about now in densely populated urban areas. But both also have low band spectrum and mid-band spectrum in the 700 to 900 megahertz range that they've been using for decades for nationwide coverage with 4G LTE. But that will still be around, and they will use that same low band spectrum for 5G using these new technologies to densify and speed up the delivery of the data and modulate it, which has biological effects. I won't go into details here, but this is the FCC spectrum, and all these little colored blocks here are allotments of specific frequencies to different companies, including radar, satellite, cellular. So cellular is here up to about 900 megahertz, 700 to 900 megahertz, and then picks up again here. This goes about 1200 up to 2400 megahertz. Anyway, so that's the cellular frequency in the low to mid band, just to show you what it looks like. So Verizon's massive holdings of the millimeter spectrum above 20 gigahertz can really only be used in dense urban areas. That's, again, a comment from a competitor of Verizon. More than 99% of Verizon's traffic is running on its 4G network. They want to shift some of that over to the 5G. And T-Mobile and AT&T promised nationwide 5G coverage in 2020, but they'll be using primarily the low to mid band to do that with some of these upgrades. So that means that 4G LTE and newly converted 5G technologies will exist below 6 gigahertz. I've said that many times. But these 5G signals can be measured and shielded against because we can measure them below 6 gigahertz. Now, this is something for electrically sensitive people to pay attention to. In rural areas, cell companies will use enhanced 4G frequencies rather than the beamformed 5G millimeter frequencies that we're all hearing such bad things about. We can measure and shield against these frequencies in the 6 gigahertz and less band because our meters go up that far and beyond. So super 20 gigahertz millimeter wave beamformed signals will not be as prevalent in rural areas. Again, the super 20 gigahertz millimeter wave beamformed signals that we're all reading about will not be as prevalent in rural areas. That's what the industry says. So that's somewhat good news for electrically sensitive people. Just live away from towns and from neighbors. And I'll go into that in more detail. So look at this. 4G and enhanced 5G below 6 gigahertz can be measured with existing radio frequency meters, because this answers the question, how can we measure 5G? Existing radio frequency meters do not measure above 20 gigahertz high band beamformed signals. They don't go up that high. 4G and 5G, enhanced 5G antennas in the low to mid band are still very harmful. I hope everyone understands that, especially when it's at close range. And if you look here, we have a reading of 200,000 microwatts per meter squared in front of that antenna and 10,000 in front of that antenna. These are two separate photographs here. So the person taking these readings and who put this on this page on his website, he's not measuring 5G, he's measuring 4G. You need to understand that. If you actually get any readings with the existing radio frequency meters that we all have now, you're not measuring above 20 gigahertz. You're not measuring above 8 gigahertz. So this is all 4G stuff that you're measuring here.
Sorry, Oram, just to add a point there. Now, for context, you're seeing there 200,000 microwatts per meter squared.
That's very high.
For context, the building biology threshold for extreme concern is 1,000 microwatts per meter squared. That's for extreme concern, right? And it goes down from there.
In sleeping areas, we say 1,000 microwatts per meter squared, which is 1 milliwatt per meter squared on some of these meters, is the beginning of the extreme range. And we want people to be at the low end or below the severe range into the slight or no range. And that starts at 10 microwatts per meter squared. And in the daytime, for healthy people, 10 to 100 microwatts. But the minute you have your cell phone next to you, you're back up to 100,000, 500,000, 500,000 microwatts. then people not even paying attention to that. They're focusing on the thing down the street and not paying attention to the thing in their pocket.
Very good point. Yeah, please continue.
Okay, so how can we measure 5G? Here are some meters that can do that. There are others on the market. So you can measure part of the 5G spectrum below 6 gigahertz with existing RF meters, like the Safe and Sound Classic, the Safe and Sound Pro, the Acoustimeter from EM Fields from Alistair Phillips. And these two are made by Safe Living Technologies in Canada. The first two, they all measure up to 8 to 10 gigahertz. And you can hear the sounds of what 4G cell towers and all wireless devices sound like, cordless telephones, routers, by going to the website for Safe Living Technologies, www.slt.co, and then on the menu bar, you go over to Education on the right, and the drop-down menu, you click on EMF sounds. Now, also, many people in the EMF community have the HF35C, which is here, with the logarithmic periodic antenna, and that's a directional antenna. It's the only one you can get with this model. It's sort of an entry-level meter. They have one right below it, but this is a popular one. But this doesn't go below 800 megahertz, so you will not be able to pick up T-Mobile's 4G, 5G service at 600 megahertz, unfortunately, with this one. But if you get the HFE 35C, which I had for a long time, before I got the HF59B, the HFE extended 35C allows you to use the omnidirectional UBB27 antenna, which gets down to 27 megahertz, which is well below the 600. So that's how that works. And you can call Safe Living Technologies in Canada and ask them more questions about that. So what about RF meters measuring above 20 gigahertz? To do that, they're not yet available. NARDA makes meters that are really spectrum analyzers, and they use diodes, and that measures in average mode, not peak. We want to measure in peak, according to the building biology profession and Professor Trevor Marshall. And so the SAF Spectrum Compact that some people are using, again, according to Dr. Marshall, measures only an average. Both lack sensitivity for millimeter wave 5G signals. That's what he told me. And this is all this information, these first 4 points are from him. And then he also said once in the cell industry settles on specific millimeter wave frequencies, and that's happening through these auctions by the FCC for the US market, and it differs in other countries, then affordable super 20 gigahertz RF detectors will be available. He's working on one. He showed it to me. But it's expensive to get the crystal to measure the specific frequencies that you want to measure. They can't do it for the whole band up there above 20 gigahertz. It would be thousands of dollars. They want to get it down to a few hundred so you can buy it and use it. So that's under development. So in terms of radio 5G and radio frequency mitigation strategies in general, as a building biologist, I ask people to keep the big picture in mind. There are many harmful radio frequency sources lurking in your home that you don't know about, both inside and outside your home, that you only will realize are present if you get a radio frequency detector, and then you can hear them and see them. That makes them audible and visible. And that includes routers, laptops, tablets, smartphones, cordless telephone base units, your wireless mouse and keyboard, Bluetooth on your computers, on both the mouse, keyboard, and the computer, thermostats, baby monitors, smart meters, the list goes on. And the Internet of Things will bring more beamform signals into your living and workspace. And these new 5G consumer electronic units that will go on the side of houses and inside the house for fixed internet, and also new routers and 5G smart speakers and routers. They're examples of fixed wireless devices. That'll bring a 5G signal into your home. So you want to avoid them. And it will also collect and exchange data with the 5G small cell antenna outside the house. And this just shows you all the things that people have now that are wireless inside of a home. So here are the 3 guiding principles. Number 1, reduce use of wireless devices. Increase distance. If you're mobile and you're out of the house, hold it away from you when you're with an air tube earphone. And then favor hardwired connections with Ethernet cables whenever and wherever possible. Ethernet cables here and here. These are very important steps. This sort of summarizes what we recommend in general, in addition to what I just said. Hardwired corded telephones on landlines for telephone, for voice calling. Ethernet connections to your computers, and then disable the Wi-Fi when you do that. because that doesn't automatically turn off the Wi-Fi when you plug that cable in. Multimedia over Coaxial Alliance, MoCA. There are 2 units that use the cables in your walls to get internet from one room to another. Or you can hire someone to put Ethernet cables in your attic or your basement or crawl space. Have a wired mouse and keyboard, and then disable the Bluetooth on the computer or pull out the dongle that you plugged in to the USB port. Then use Ethernet cables for streaming TV. Sony and Sharp smart TVs will allow you to disable the Wi-Fi. The other brands don't. Hardwired workaround does exist for Sonos music speakers using an Ethernet network, and you can use a multimedia over cable alliance or coaxial alliance adapter to then get the internet into that room. You can disable Wi-Fi on Nest and Ventstar thermostats. You should hardwire baby monitors. Use hardwired baby monitors. D-Link makes one that you can plug an Ethernet cable in. When you do, it turns off the Wi-Fi on the D-Link camera and microphone, and also for surveillance cameras. And all of these solutions provide fast, stable, safe, and secure connections, and they're good for your health.
Now, you and I, Oram, authored, we teamed up and wrote the 7 essential ways to make your home safe from 5G and EMF. So this presentation is a companion to that PDF. So if you're watching this, if you haven't grabbed a copy of that PDF, please do so, because that document actually links to the specific products that Oram and I are recommending.
And colleagues of mine from the building biology profession participated in that as well, yes. So for electrically sensitive people, electrical hypersensitivity is EHS. 5G will initially and primarily be deployed in urban areas, dense urban areas initially, as you saw on the map. So for you should prefer rural areas with few neighbors. The less people around you, the less chance that the cell company is going to put an antenna there, because it costs money for them to do that. And they do have to pay some money for leasing to the municipality. So stay out of urban areas as much as possible in terms of visiting there. I have clients who can't come into cities who are that sensitive. The big health hazard will be in suburban neighborhoods and rural area. The big health hazard when you're in suburban areas and rural areas, in towns, in the small towns and rural areas, will be the constant 4G signals at close range, along with the 5G antennas. But you can measure those with your radio frequency meter, and you can provide shielding against those frequencies, and also the 5G frequencies, as you'll see in just a moment. And then furthermore, avoid devices that draw the 5G signal into your home. You have choice about this. So don't purchase a new 4G, 5G phones. Keep the one you have. They'll be around well, avoid a phone that has 5G capability. Keep your cell phone off when you're at home. We talked about all that. And use a corded telephone. Do not purchase 5G-enabled routers or smart speakers. 5G signal will not sweep the neighborhoods. This is what the engineers kept telling me, like 4G will. But 5G beamed signals to the device when the device initiates the connection, and that'll be a 2 to 15 degree narrow beam. And the neighbor's cell phone will connect primarily to his Wi-Fi network, and urban areas will be saturated with 5G. So this is sort of a synopsis here of a roadmap for people who are electrically sensitive.
A question. Now, it says keep cell phones off when at home. I would say, or wire them with an adapter. Now, in our PDF document, we have a link to specific adapters. I think one for Apple and one for Android. What can you tell us quickly about that? Because it works great for me, and it seems to be a quick and effective solution. Yeah.
Yes, for data, for iPhones and iPads. Getting on the internet, email, the basic things works fine. It doesn't work for voice calling, because that's 2G, 3G technology, although they're phasing 2G out. That's voice and texting. That's completely separate, and you need to get that from the tower. Although there is for a Wi-Fi calling now, but it doesn't work. At least with 1 or 2 clients that I've tried it with recently who have that service, it didn't come through the Ethernet cable, unfortunately. And iPhone 10s, people are telling me that things that worked when they had other models and then they upgraded to the iPhone 10, like Instagram, even the iMessaging, they're not coming through on the cable anymore. So it's frustrating. And although there is this thing that goes to your computer that I mentioned earlier for people who have MacBooks and iMacs. Now, I learned about the Android connection from working with you on that 7 steps, the 7 essential ways to make your home safe project. And I bought that, the on-the-go adapter that has a technology, but it didn't work. It hasn't worked so far with the Android users that I've tested it with, although they may not have this technology that they talked about. So I have to explore that a little further. So Android is not so consistent, but with iPhones and iPads, you can definitely do a lot of data exchange, but you have to put it in airplane mode, and that gets and make sure that the Wi-Fi is still not enabled, because you can have So that's
I find it's very effective using an app like Telegram, which apparently has good encryption, and apparently it's quite secure. You know, we don't know for sure, but you can do calling on that. You can do
you can do calling over the internet with WhatsApp, with Skype, with FaceTime, I think, Google. There are a number of different ways, and you just mentioned another one, so thank you.
Yeah, in terms of surveillance and data harvesting, Telegram is currently my favorite, but yeah, please continue.
Okay.
I mean, lack of data harvesting and surveillance as far as we know, but yeah, please continue.
Yes. Now, if you use 5G smartphone or fixed wireless internet, you will draw a beamform signal into your home. I cannot emphasize this enough. Let me repeat it. If you're electrically sensitive, but you or your husband or your adult teenage child lives in the home and they've got a 4G, 5G phone, that 5G signal that I talked about will come into the house. Instead of going, and whatever it happens with the neighbor, it will come into your house too, directly. And same thing with a fixed device like the fixed internet that we talked about. And as I mentioned earlier, I said in a later slide, I point this out, and here it is. Many electrically sensitive clients that I have still use their cell phones way too often, and it's hard, and they have symptoms from it. Daphne Tackover made the same comment. She cannot understand why so many people who are electrically sensitive still use cell phones. I know there's convenience, but you can do so much with a corded telephone and all the other suggestions we make. So get used to a corded landline telephone for voice calls and hardwired computers for all your data and texting. And you can text using iMessage on a hardwired Mac, and WhatsApp and Skype on a hardwired PC when home. And now here's shielding. So this product here, Y-Shield paint, and then this building grade aluminum foil, copper mesh, metal building foils, they block low and mid-band sub-6 gigahertz frequencies. We already know that. And Y-Shield and foil will also block the frequencies above 20 gigahertz. That's our expectation. I'll show you a graph on that in a minute. Now, RF fabric and clothing only blocks the sub-6 gigahertz frequencies. Trevor Marshall, Larry Gust, the engineers have told me that that the weave is not close enough to block the millimeter wave frequencies that are in the super 20 gigahertz millimeter band. So most RF clothing, fabric and clothing will not block millimeter wave frequencies well. But Trevor did say that, Dr. Marshall did say that there's a silver fabric under development that he's working on to shield 5G high band signals. So that's encouraging. So here's the graph. So look at this. This is aluminum foil shielding performance. And here's 10 gigahertz. So here's 100. So here would be 20 would be right there. You see, this is pretty much a flat line. We expect that this would continue. Nobody's tested it yet, according to Rob Metzinger, but and this is from his company, Safe Living Technologies. But aluminum foil is expected, and Y-Shield paint as well would have a similar performance pattern here. It's expected to continue to give. I mean, that's 100 decibels. That's pretty high. That's 10 decibels is 90%, 20 decibels is 99%, etc. Now, on the other hand, when you look at Swiss Shield fabric, all of these lines are in a downward trend here. Comparison of Swiss Shield fabric RF performance with other materials. And here they are at the top. These are all fabrics, and they're all in a downward decline. So no testing has been done on this above 18 gigahertz, which is why they stopped. But you're looking at, well, still 90%. 10 decibels is a 90% reduction, and 20 decibels is 99%. That's in laboratory testing. In the field, it's maybe not so good, but not as well. But it's up to you. You have to see what your tolerance is as you get in your 5G transmitters in urban areas and in neighborhoods as they start putting them in with hoodies and different materials that you can wear to protect yourself, or get a fabric and put it around your head like a burqa. And likewise, copper mesh is also on a downward decline here as you go into the millimeter band. So now, neighborhood strategies, others on your summit covered this in much more detail. I'll just highlight it here. Local and national efforts do exist to slow and halt 5G deployment without proper testing for all the reasons that were stated very well by the people you interviewed. We encourage people to join them. Resist 4G and 5G antennas in residential neighborhoods. They don't belong there. Bring high-speed data to homes through hardwired connections. The 5G activists, in summary, say restrict 5G antennas to existing macro cell sites that are 1.5 miles apart. Require a 2,500-foot setback between any 5G or 4G antennas and residential areas. Place antennas above roof lines at least 150 feet high, not at ground level. And also restrict 5G to commercial and industrial areas. And 4G, LTE, and 5G do not belong in residential neighborhoods. I already said that. And this is an example from Verizon of what it would look like. These are the 4G antennas here, and then the 5G is this little rectangular box right here. This is you had Tim Shockley. I think he and Camila Reese put this out. Fiber to the premises, best solution. Hardwired Ethernet, local area networks within homes. We advocate that in the building biology profession. These provide fast, stable, reliable, secure, and safe data and voice connections. And this book is Reinventing Wires, The Future of Landlines and Networks, published by Camila Reese, National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy, and others joined her in this effort. And this is really the last slide. It just shows you that you can have underground fiber connections going to each of these homes, right into the homes. And this is what the cable companies already do, Comcast, Cox, Spectrum, the old Time Warner, and the telephone companies, AT&T and Verizon, which sold off most of their telephone service to Frontier, although there's Verizon still in the Northeast for landline. And so this is underground, this is overhead, it's all hardwired all the way to the homes. So then I have some websites here. I won't mention them verbally, but they're on these 2 pages here. So that's the end of the presentation, Josh.
Excellent. Oram, thank you so much for your time today and for this incredible amount of information. Where can people reach you? I see you have your website there. Tell us a little bit about the Building Biology Institute and the coverage and support in the multiple countries that the Institute provides.
All right, so on the Building Biology website, or Building Biology Institute website, which is based in North America for the US and Canada, and we have graduates who are in other countries around the world. So go to www.buildingbiologyinstitute.org and then find an expert at the top. And then you'll get a drop-down or a page, and then you click on certified consultants, and you're looking for environmental consultants. And when you click on that page, you see a whole list that is alphabetized of individuals, colleagues of mine. I'm in there, and my colleagues throughout North America. And that's alphabetized by state or province. So that's where you can find people in North America. And then we also have graduates of our certification program for the Building Biology New Construction program. And so they're listed separately there. Those are primarily architects and builders who've taken training on how to implement these steps in new and remodeled homes and offices. There's also the Building Biology Institute, or I'm sorry, the Building Biology profession in Germany. They have a German name for their organization, and their website is www.buildingbiology.com. I believe that's their website. And they have an English website as well as a German one. And they have graduates, of course, in Europe, Germany and Europe, and also New Zealand and Australia. So that's how you, and then there are other people who do EMFs, other professions out. We're not the only ones, and we're not, we don't have exclusive knowledge about this. There are many other people out there, GeoVital and other organizations and individuals, Brian Hoyer, I think is his name, who are doing some good work helping people. So, look for specialists who can help you with this. Learn as much as you can, get meters, get educated, and start taking readings, and then figure out what they mean. And any of us can help with implementation of solutions.
Excellent. Oram, on behalf of all of the listeners and viewers and participants in this course, we thank you for your time. As you're watching this, we thank you. We thank you for joining us, for sharing your time to be part of this conversation, to get educated, and to really take the next step in protecting your home, your family, and those around you. So thank you, and we'll see you in the next module.